So we have time for a few questions. I don't know if there are any questions in the chat for any of our speakers, but might as well have our speakers come up front in case they're called upon to answer any questions.
So for the last speaker, I was very impressed by what you did, but I wonder, you could also use this without converting to fibers, because the flat geometry is not that bad. Kiel also used it. So what do you think about that?
It's definitely possible. I think a lot of the issues that we ran into, it's definitely possible. A lot of the issues we were running into with like the flat geometry is that it's more difficult to be mass produced. I was, hand synthesizing it, and because there's already a lot of like infrastructure in place to produce hollow fiber, it's more streamlined and it fits into everything better. But I agree with you. It, theoretically could be possible to, use the flat geometry as well for dialysate recycling.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Steve? Yep.
Yes, this is working. My name is Jeroen van den Broek. I also have a question for the last speaker, for Rachel. First of all, very nice presentation. I was wondering, normally these polymer membranes are quite notorious for having a really polydispersed pore size. And it's quite amazing that you can separate them between glucose and urea. Do you have any data on the polydispersity of your membranes?
Right. We have done imaging. We'd like to do more because a lot of the imaging we did was early on when we didn't fully refine the pore sizes. I'll be honest, a lot of the tightness of the pore distribution, we still need a lot of data on that. But I propose that kind of as the most plausible theory for why we were able to achieve such good separation.
Okay, I'm very curious for the data when it comes out. Thank you very much.
Hi, Steve Ash again. A comment related to Vivek's presentation. Excellent. But the comment is that I think this idea of the outside-in dialysis can be a tremendous improvement in biocompatibility. And you showed that the clearances were approximately the same, whether it was outside in to inside out.
Yeah, so we're still need to actually do a little bit more data on this. Sorry. Yes, so we still need to have a little bit more data on this, because the new membranes where the skin side is now on the outside just recently has been created. Actually, it was done by researchers. Well, it was done by the company Medica. We have, so for small molecules, it's like basically the same because it's diffusive. It doesn't really matter, like, whether the concentration difference is one side versus the other. For convective, we've done only for a few molecules and it seems to be fine, but we need to kind of systematically go to much higher molecular weight. So it's still something that needs to kind of look at. We still need to look at it a little bit more in detail.
Just one comment and question. Regarding CRRT, you pointed out that really the limitation for small and large molecules is this very low dialysate flow. It's always bothered me to hook a patient up to CVVHD and then have a 300 mil per minute blood flow and a 30 mil per minute dialysate flow.
Yep.
It would seem to me regenerating that dialysate through a simple carbon block and just circulating to a bag would effectively get rid of the organic uremic toxins that we're really interested in. And changing the bag now and then would handle the urea and phosphate. Wouldn't that work effectively?
So I can tell you, I'm actually not a clinician by training, so some of those details I wouldn't know in terms of how the practicality is of it. I think probably a clinician would have a better idea in terms of the practicalities, whether what you're saying would work. But I think in principle, I think what you're saying sounds reasonable.
If you're interested in removing organic toxins, though, principally organic molecules, carbon block regeneration should work well, shouldn't it?
Yeah, actually, I'd like to address that comment. It's really hard to get away from urea. That 120 liters is roughly 10 millimolar to get the 15 grams per day out. So you really hit that fundamental wall of needing 100 liters. So you wouldn't be able to swap out a bag.
I mean, I'm talking about creatinine.
Oh, yeah, activated carbon can go after all that. Yeah, and that was seen with the READY systems back in the 70s. Activated carbon
for those,
worked
it
good
would be
enough.
effective. So it would be a halfway solution from a serving standpoint, but you can still change the bags when you need to for the larger volume. And I'm not a chemical engineer either, Vivek. That's why we need people like you.
Yeah, I have two questions. We've heard a lot, obviously, about the organics of removal and sort of scaling to a portable device. Can somebody talk a little bit about sort of ionic, potassium and some of the other ions? Is that an issue with having a small device? I'm a clinician, so I blindly assumed that you needed all this sort of fluid flow in a regular sort of standard dialysis machine to sort of wash away all the potassium. Can somebody talk to that a little bit?
So stay tuned for tomorrow. Yeah, you're absolutely right. The kidney maintains homeostasis for minerals and electrolytes. It's not just toxin removal, as well as fluid balance as well. And so any of these approaches that are strictly focused on toxin removal won't completely replicate what's needed. So there have to be systems in place to maintain mass balance for a variety of different minerals and electrolytes. And there are different approaches that can be taken, and there are going to be speakers. Another one is acid-base homeostasis, so you've got to maintain the right amount of bicarbonate, for example, in the bloodstream. So we'll have some talks tomorrow that'll deal more with the mineral and electrolyte balance. Today has been a little bit more focused on toxin removal.
And my second question, probably most directed to Dr. Ratner. So it sounds like you have a pretty good handle on the chemistry you need to sort of make significant advances in biocompatibility. So sort of what are the major hurdles? Is it scaling up? Is it, sort of doing the toxicology to make sure that, that these sort of coatings are stable and sort of don't cause other sort of off-intended effects? So how quickly can you move on this, and what do you need to do to make it a reality?
Yeah, those are excellent questions. I teach a course on how to commercialize biomedical technology, so I am acutely aware of those questions. We do ISO 10993 testing in our own lab on all these coatings, and all of them have passed ISO 10993. But for the FDA, you have to do it under GLP, good laboratory practices, and that quadruples the cost for doing such experiments. I think we have some pretty good chemistries at the moment. I think they're readily scalable up, and I think just some partnership with commercial entities are going to allow us to get it to the next step to bring these to not just dialysis, but many other devices contacting the bloodstream.
Hello, everyone. Richard Knight here. Great presentations. And it's been a few years since I've had a course in chemistry. It was a little bit different than back in the 70s. But my question for you is this, and I think, Dr. Ratner, you might have begun to hit on it. What does this mean for example, dialysis patients? Does it mean faster dialysis, more efficient dialysis? Does it mean better outcomes? And what type of time frame? 5, 10, 15 years? Just to kind of put it into perspective for people with a limited science background, such as myself. Thank you.
Yeah, 5, 10, 15 years. No, if we wanted to be optimistic, we'd say we could maybe get some of these developments in 5 years. I don't think that's unreasonable. But again, this transition process from going from the lab. CDI is really a university-based research organization. To taking it to commercialization requires partnerships. And AAKP helps us with partnerships. And the Kidney X program is very much focused on partnerships. And I think this is the fiscal investment in going from what looks like a translatable laboratory development to something that reaches patients. The fiscal investment is huge, and it really challenges academic groups.
I have a question for the first speaker, Dr. Nassim Han. You showed a paper from 1991 that the coefficient versus the flow rate. I understand that the coefficient, sieving coefficient, is very high at high flux rate, but I don't understand why it's so high at the extremely low flow rate.
Yeah, so at a very low flow rate, what ends up happening is if you don't have any ultrafiltration, you just have molecular diffusion. If you have only molecular diffusion, right, molecular diffusion will cause the concentration to be the same on both sides, because once diffusion will eventually cause concentrations to equilibrate, right? And so that's what ultimately is the case. If you have very little ultrafiltration, it's just you have diffusive transfer through the membrane, and that basically causes no selectivity, essentially.
Is that also true for large molecules?
It's also true for large molecules, but then the question is, what is the time scale over which you have to wait to kind of see this? That's it'll become a time-dependent process.
So again, Fokko Wieringa from the Netherlands. So the previous speaker, Richard Knight, his question, I like that, and I want to go into that. So scaling up is indeed one of those things that should not be underestimated, and the importance is huge. And it might be good news then that within the Netherlands, we now just got a big project with government funding with about 30 million euros for making building blocks for artificial organs and scaling the production up. So specifically scaling up the processes to make those building blocks. And I would be very interested in getting some more cooperation on that, because I think the biology is everywhere the same. So we all need this worldwide. And if we have programs that would stimulate the production or translating it to production, it would be great at least to talk about that. So you're invited.
Paul Yeager, University of Washington. I want to say I'm very impressed by the technical progress here, and as somebody with a degree in chemistry, I'm impressed. I've got a quick question for Professor Narasimhan, though. I love the idea of moving the clots to the other side of the cartridge, but the good thing about having the clots forming inside the tubes is that they're then stuck.
Yep.
Where they don't get back into the patient. Whereas if you have them on the other side, it seems like they could break free and end up, while the cartridge doesn't fail, the patient does. Can you just talk about what happens to those clots?
Yeah, so as of now, we don't see as much, it's still preliminary stages, but I would say we haven't seen so much evidence of this, but again, none of this stuff has been really tested on patients per se, right? So we have to first do the engineering to really understand what's exactly happening in the dialyzer unit, and then do careful characterization, and then we can see whether we can go to a patient. At the moment, I mean, I think it's still in the preliminary stages, but this is definitely an issue that has to be addressed. But we were hoping that the idea is that this filter life is like a big concern. This is one simple way to kind of address it. Yeah.
Okay, this concludes this session, our morning session. We'd like everyone to come up to the stage so we can take a group picture, and then we'll all have lunch. I don't know if who's organizing the group picture. I think CB is.